All right, so we're going to move on to Roseanne, who is going to talk about repotting and pots and soil choices for caring for your houseplants. Roseanne, are you ready?
I am ready. Let's start at the beginning. All right, so one of the things I love about these plant clinics is you learn so many things. You know, whether you're attending them or you're researching to do a presentation. And in my case, I have a lot of houseplants, and in doing the research for this, I learned that I am now the poster child for what not to do. I have done everything wrong according to my research, which I'm going, oh my goodness, I'm surprised anything is still alive. But thankfully, plants are pretty resilient if they get the right amount of water and nutrients. So for houseplants, they really benefit mostly from the occasional repotting, which I haven't done. So when do you repot and what do you use? And that's what this presentation is all about. You want to look for, particularly if the roots are coming out of the bottom of your plant, your pot, then that's a good indication that you need to repot your poor little guy. All right. And then late winter and early spring are probably really good times to do that. So what kind of pot should you choose? My research showed that it should be about a third larger than your current pot, or with a diameter of about 2 inches larger, so that the plant has room to grow. You want to have drainage holes, whether they be in the side or the bottom, doesn't matter. You just need that good drainage so that you don't end up with root rot, particularly if you have too much soil in the pot. You can get a buildup of excess water. It's not going to be able to drain enough, and you get that root rot. You also want to have room enough for that root ball. Give it room to grow. You know, don't just stuff it into a pot and make it close quarters. And then you also want to have enough room above the soil for proper watering. So you want to make sure you don't drown it just in the soil. All right. So what kind of pots you want? There's a couple kinds of pots out there. It was kind of interesting looking at those. There's pros and cons to all of them. So terracotta clay ones, they're really good because they absorb moisture, but they can also lose it through their walls. So they really provide excellent aeration for those plants, which encourages your root growth. Because what happens is, because the pot walls are moist, the roots are going to grow near the walls. Okay, the problem with the terracotta though is it can be easily broken. And if you're trying to get your pot out to repot it again, they're not really flexible like the plastic ones. You know, you can't push on it and kind of juggle that little bugger out of there. Ceramic ones, they come in glazed or not glazed. Even the terracottas can be glazed. The glazed ones are probably the best because they retain the moisture a little bit longer, plus they're prettier. You can find different kinds. But again, a con to them is they can get easily chipped or broken, which takes away, of course, from the aesthetic value of them. Okay. Some of them don't have enough drainage holes. You know, it might just be this tiny little thing, if at all. So what you can do, if you're going to put another pot inside of it, is you can put some broken shards from the terracotta pot or some stones or something in the bottom, and then put that second pot inside, which gives room at the bottom for drainage, but you've still got a pot full of good soil. So that was a good thing to learn about. You want to avoid any of the novelty types because they're mostly ornamentals. And I have a perfect example. I like gnomes, and my neighbor gave me a cute little gnome pot. Let me tell you, it's completely worthless. You can grow something in there, you cannot get it out. It has no holes. It just sits there. So it's now sitting in my garden collecting water. But it's cute. Hey, okay. Otherwise worthless. The other type are the plastic or fiberglass ones. These are easy to handle. They're lightweight, inexpensive, so they're easy to clean and sterilize. Plants are going to require less watering, and the pots don't accumulate those soluble salts that can build up from all the watering. So One of the disadvantages, though, is some of them lack those drainage holes. So you're going to have to put them in there. They can also fade out if you put them in the bright sun in the summertime on your deck or something. Or if you leave them out in the cold weather, they can become brittle. So that's some of concern. But if you're just keeping them in the house, that works. So what about recycling them? Okay, I recycle all my pots, from one year to the next. Again, this was an education. You want to clean them sufficiently, okay? Scrub any of those soluble salts off with water and a brush. A 1 to 9 liquid bleach to water solution is suggested because it also kills off any disease-causing organisms. And you want to be sure to dry them thoroughly before you put another plant in them. So then we go to the repotting. What about soil? Okay, you want a sterile potting medium because we know that the soil provides nutrients and air and water. It also allows for maximum root growth. And it also provides some physical support for that plant. All right. So because that air also goes down into those soil spaces and it pushes, if you have the wrong kind of soil or too much soil, it can actually push the air out. So there's insufficient or no drainage in the pot. So that prevents any fresh air from coming in. And then your roots can suffocate. So you really want a light and fluffy type of soil. So some of the types of soil that I found were the garden soil. When you go to the nursery or the home supply stores, they have those garden soils. Those are much too dense for house pot plants, okay, for the pots. You can top off, if you have a house plant, you can top off with a little bit of topsoil, maybe an inch or so, if it's a very large container, but no more than about 10% of the volume. The soil-less mix are the best type because they're very lightweight. They're kind of a commercial blend, and they're perfect for the containers. They hold water and nutrients. They allow for good drainage. They're usually free of any weeds and insects and disease. And they also contain a slow release fertilizer. So that's going to allow for your plants to get some fertilizer over a long term. All right, so what kind of the planting mix that you want is going to be containing some perlite, okay, that's that white, sterile, lightweight stuff that's kind of porous, okay, and that's going to help promote any aeration. Problem is it doesn't hold water very well, and the nutrients, you can get some burn on your leaves if you have too much of that in there, okay. But there's also vermiculite, okay, larger particles here, so it allows for good aeration of the water and nutrient retention. And then you have sphagnum peat moss. This has a high water retention capability. Sometimes we see planting or potting soil mixes at the garden stores. Okay, these are different in composition. Okay, so you want to avoid these since they don't really have adequate aeration. Okay, if you do get one, add a little bit of perlite, vermiculite, or some porous sands, because this is going to help to increase the porosity and the aeration factor. Okay. All right. So they have potting soil or planting soils that are specific for certain things. So for instance, and this is probably the best way to go, you have soil for foliage plants. Yes. Okay. So these hold moisture and have fertilizer. You can also get soil for flowering indoor plants. These are usually labeled the African violet potting mix. You can use this for African violets, gloxinias, begonias, calla lilies, other tropicals. Okay. Soil for cacti and succulents, very specific. The advantage to this is it's less humus as opposed to the one for foliage plants, and it has more sand because you don't want that heavy humus in there for the cacti, because they need a lot of water going through there. And then you have your orchid mixes. You don't want a regular potting soil for orchids. I'm not an expert. I've killed quite a few thinking I could grow them. And I obviously, after this, have learned I did it all wrong. But the interesting thing about the orchids is they grow on tree branches. I didn't know that. And rather than the on ground. And that's why you want to avoid any regular potting soil, because you'll end up with root rot. You want a very porous, lumpy, and a little water retention on any soil for that. So these were my resources: University of Maryland Extension, and then the Virginia Tech site on indoor plant culture. So